going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Squawk and C's podcast. And this week is specifically two unaccomplished guys. One guy that's really good at the game.
Bro, I have no catch finishes, bro.
L, brother. How many limitless pages do you got? We'll get there in a second.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
We'll talk about it. Yeah, we're back with another episode, folks. Everyone's favorite Pokemon TCG podcast. I hope. My name is Kyle, or Koopa, how you may know me on the internet. And this week, we have another guest on. We have two guests in a row this week. We'll introduce our guests in a second, but I got to introduce my co-host. Coming in with a hot new camera, a hot new microphone. You're like a better help sponsorship away from being a real podcaster right now. The Pony Bottle Champ himself, Mr. George for Rage.
Listen, all we could do is just get better, right? At the game, at life, at podcasting. That's it, man. No, dude, once we get a sponsor with this new mic, I'm going to crush it. I'm going to have that real announcer voice going.
Yeah, Manscaped, I'm looking at you. But we are joined this week.
Look at that beard. Come on. Look at these beards.
That's
I'm slacking.
But we are joined again, like I said, by a very special guest this week. Another one of our fellow bird brains, Pokemon player extraordinaire, coming off of just a hair outside of top 64 at Baltimore Regionals with Awesome Zard, as we're dubbing it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Mr. Michael Bio. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Hello.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good, and I'm really excited to talk to you this week. We've been kind of penciling this for a while. We said if you won Baltimore, we would have you on the guests before Emily, but
honestly, could have been. There was definitely a lot of potential there.
Could have been, but we'll get into the nitty gritty in a bit. But I'll start the episode as I do every week, and I'll ask Mike this question first. Mike, how's your Monday going? Because we're recording a little early this week to fit everyone's schedule. So how's your Monday?
Yeah, my Monday's okay. Just was doing some laddering before because I haven't gone to locals in like 2 weeks. So I'm going tomorrow. So I'm just putting all my guys together. So I got to put my get together. Got to keep prepping for Louisville. I haven't really played that many games over the last couple weeks since Baltimore. We'll see. I'm like between two decks right now, but I don't know. We'll see. To be honest, if I just roll up, I obviously won't roll up with the same 60. We'll get into a couple changes because of the new format, but I can't imagine myself playing like Reggie Drago or something like
that. That deck's for stinkers.
Mm-hmm.
George, same question. How's your Monday going, buddy? How you doing?
Listen, man, I went really hard on Saturday, and in your mid-30s, dude, you can't do that. So it's been a rough day, but we got through it. I had to drive all the way down to like Somerset, and I did stop at that one place down there. Was it Retro TCG Tabletop? I'm still trying to find you Dragapults, man. I'm looking everywhere. I'm really trying, but they're nowhere to be found.
That deck stinks. I'll wait. It's fine. But all right, good to know. We'll talk about the local results in a bit because George had a fun weekend. But yeah, just I feel you. This Monday's been rough for me. I went to a concert on Saturday. I went to emo night at Webster Hall in New York this weekend, and boy, let me tell you, going in a mosh pit in your 30s kind of sucks. And I woke up on Sunday with some of the worst lower body pain I've ever experienced. But I'm a simple man. I hear My Chemical Romance and I start throwing hammer fists. So,
dude, I was in a frat
My Chemical Romance
football game. Crazy.
Yeah. My Chemical Romance, first concert I've ever attended at the Izod Center.
The Izod Center?
Fun fact right there. The Izod Center. Throwback.
Dude.
Yeah.
No, dude. Wow. I was at my brother goes to University of South Carolina, and they had a tailgate. It's called the Lot. It's just like a big like parking lot with just like shit ton of DJ stands and tents. And I haven't sweat like that in maybe a year. I was actually dying, just like covered in beer. I was like, this is awful. And then the best part was we didn't even go to the game. I literally went back to my brother's house. We showered and then immediately went to like a nice dinner with my parents. That was a miserable dinner. I was barely like conscious. Yeah, go Cox.
Sounds like a fun time to me. Wish I was.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah,
it was a good time. It was a good time.
George calls that Thursday. So
Yeah, seriously. Sometimes Tuesday.
All right, well,
Who knows?
sometimes or your Tuesday just
Depends,
opened up this
it
week.
depends on the week.
Yeah.
Yep.
But talking about things, as we like to do round things up locally, and everybody give your snaps and your claps for Mr. George finishing in top 4 of a cup this weekend. So, George, you want to talk a little bit
Thank
about
you.
talk about it a bit? How you feeling?
All right. Well, the story goes like this. I've been playing Zard for a long time. Everybody knows it. Michael also is a Zard bot himself. And he has been trying to tell me to play the same 60 for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months now that he's been playing.
While.
And I
Too
always
long.
argue with him. And I remember NIC, I argued with him, and he just keeps finishing a lot better than I do. So I succumbed. I conceded to him. I said, all right, Mike, I'm going to play your list to this cup. And he was nice enough to give me a call the day of and kind of coach me through some lines from some different things. And yeah, I went undefeated 3-0. ID'd into top cut. It was only top 4. Then had some really bad luck into Miraidon, which should be a very easy matchup, but they got pretty lucky. And Iono to 2 was a lie because they top deck boss and I lost that way. So it was unfortunate, but listen, if you could top a cup, it's achievement regardless. It's points. It's a step further to getting to where you want to be, and we can replace them. It's all good. It's just getting better and better.
Knocking at the door, the cup win. Knocking at the door.
Yeah, that mat will be yours soon. So good stuff to you, man. That's a lot of fun. I was unable to attend the Dragon Eye Cup this weekend because I had to work. So being employed is unfortunately my worst trait. But I'm going to the Highlander Cup next week, which will be a lot of fun.
Very nice.
And I think I'm going to play this sucker because this deck is fun.
God,
Whoa.
this guy already.
Bro, damage counters go crazy. This deck is stupid. Taking curse for 330, brother. Sign the slip. Oh man, but we love to see it. And again, good stuff to you, George. We, like you said, as Mike has said many times just before, a lot of us just hate winning because we never just play his lists. So I think it's about time we all start listening to the rocket scientists in the room.
Kyle, he's coming after you, bro.
I'm looking. Oh, jeez. like the Green Goblin mask, bro. I always keep that. I keep that thing on me at all times.
Oh my god!
He is staring me in the face. But I guess before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's conversation, Mike, for the people uninclined to your history as a player, why don't you give the folks at home a little bit of a what's your history with Pokemon as a competitive medium? Because you come from a sports background, you're a pretty competitive guy. So how did your journey into Big Pikachu start?
So I had cards when I was younger, when I was 2008, 2009, because I've had the binder that I had in my room for the entirety of my life, and kind of 2019. So I played a little bit of VG in 2017 and 2018, and that was fun. I was a showdown grinder, it is what it, kind of very competitive casual kind of I would get up to 1800 on ladder, which really isn't that high. I mean, it's high, but when the ladder if you sit on the ladder for long enough, you'll eventually get there. But then, because I was in high school, and I don't know, it was fine. But once the double restricted formats came back, in 2019, so the 18-19 season, that's what they used to do instead of the new regulations. And I just didn't like having to spam the same stuff every single game. It's oh boy, I get to hit Kyogre Rayquaza this time. It's it wasn't just fun for me. But so I stopped playing for a year. I kind of would play casually, but that was about it. I'm a big Battle Revolution where I just play on my Wii whenever I get the chance. But then in 2019, my friend Nick and we kind of got back into it on PTCGO right after. I think it was right before Team Up get released, but we didn't do anything in person. It was just all online. Just played very casually. I remember I had it was a superior M-board deck because it was a modified theme deck that I played. And I remember I was so frustrated every time I'd play against someone on ladder with a Zoroark GX in their deck because it was just such a better card. And of course, I didn't understand that the packs, because for those of you who don't know, like PTCGO, you had to use packs to trade for the cards you needed. You couldn't just craft them, which is it's like one of the few great things that PTCG Live has to offer. So I just was never able to get all the good cards because when they were good, they were way too expensive for any of the packs that I had. So basically up until Cosmic Eclipse came out, I played it solely online. Then, when I was at school, I decided to go and buy some cards. So my first deck that I built in person was actually ADP-Z, probably the most toxic deck to ever exist. Maybe not ever, but pretty bad. And I remember the first time I ever played against somebody that wasn't like one of my good friends or my brother in person, I played against Vinny D'Arcy, a New Jersey fiend, and he was playing, I think it was Rapid Strike Urshifu or something, because for the entirety of 2020, I wasn't able, it was COVID, so no one went anywhere. Like, we were planning to go to some locals, but then it was like March of that year, and wasn't able to do it, right? But I remember playing for the first time, and I was like, wow, like this is actually a lot of fun. Granted, he beat me up, but that's just kind of what happens when you're a brand new player. I was definitely a grinder during COVID. I didn't know how to do like the Limitless Online or anything like that. Like the Players Cup, I didn't know how to qualify for that. I just kind of played on ladder. And then 22, I got a little more into it. I played a lot more locally, like the beginning, kind of the revival of the Highlander League. Played a lot there. Played a lot of Arceus. Basically, I played only Inteleon decks for the better part of a year. I just went Urshifu, Arceus, Palkia. Fortunately for me, where I went to school in Indiana, the store we had didn't have like sanctioned events. We would always run case tournaments, like unofficial case tournaments for each set release. So that was pretty cool. I also got to do the team challenge in season 3. So I think that was like the beginning of 2021, maybe. That was a lot of fun. And then, once events came back, I didn't do any events in 2022, the calendar year, like for that season or that year. And then I went to my first regional in Orlando 23, which was a lot of fun. Came pretty close to day 2, like shockingly close to day 2. And yeah, then from there, went on a run of plenty of 5-2-2s, 6-3s, 5-3-1s, 5-1-3s. And then finally this year, I, made day 2 for the first time in Orlando with my boy Lost Gudra. And then from there, I haven't missed a major day 2, except for Worlds, which it is what it is. So yeah.
Yep, that all sounds, very in depth. You picked a great time to jump into the game,
Yeah.
And shout outs to the boy Lost Gudra. But yeah, listen, you're a very decorated player at this point, and you had quite the interesting list going into to Baltimore. So, and I think you were even if you didn't perform, as well as you did in Baltimore, you're still someone I would have loved to pencil in here because you are a competitor. And I think since you were on the floor, deep into the cut, experiencing this new system, I figured you would be the right guy to talk about it. So let's talk a little bit about leading up to Baltimore. Obviously you're the Zard guy. I don't think you were swaying too much, or maybe you were out. I'm not sure your creative process, but talk a little bit about how you landed on Charizard, how you ended up landing on the list that you did, a little bit of that creative process going into that.
So I've been playing Charizard basically almost exclusively since rotation, since EUIC last year. I don't know. I played Gardevoir a lot, basically exclusively pre-rotation, but especially the Temporal Forces format. That format for Gardevoir was just awful, and I just was tired of, drawing into Mirage Step. I guess we lost Mirage Step, but basically getting everything perfectly set up, having an insane setup, and then I magically lose to a Greninja boss, and I'm like, oh wait, I have no way to. I prize my last super. I have no way to move this Greninja. I just lose. So I definitely wanted to change something, just because other decks just seemed a little bit more appealing. I also thought it's funny because when Charizard got released, I thought Charizard was a super bot deck. Granted, because it also took a really bad Gardevoir matchup, especially against someone who knew what they were doing. But the deck was super strong. The list I played at EUIC was pretty bad, and I definitely got punished. But once I saw the Tord version, I'm like, okay, this deck is insanely broken. I played it a lot. It basically single-handedly got me my invite, those 60 cards, because I was able to I won 6 cups in a row with that 60, which is pretty, that's a lot of weekends of playing Pokemon. And then I was able to do pretty well at Indianapolis Regionals with it. And then I also played a quite similar version to NAIC. Granted, I was playing on Fair Stamp, and it was slightly different, but virtually it was the same thing with Pidgeot and Bibarel and Cleffa and the whole suite of guys. So that was really good. And for Worlds, I think I went a little too safe with my build of the deck. I kind of had a little bit of a misread. I was playing maybe too thick of a Charizard line. I was just kind of sticking to kind of what I knew, like just more consistent deck just works more. But I think there were a couple things that I missed. Maybe a little bit slimmer. I would have been able to include more tech cards. Maybe a little bit better Regidrago matchup, because I was, unfortunately, I had to take a loss to some guy from China playing Regidrago. Granted, I would argue I had a fair amount of bad luck in day one of Worlds, but, that's Pokemon, right? You get a little bit lucky, a little bit unlucky. In regards to the prep for this event specifically, I was actually, right after Worlds, a lot of the guys that I was working with, we were all on like a Lugia version, which some people ended up playing to the event. I think it was only one person, but we were like thinking about playing like Lugia right off the bat with Prime Catcher, which like was good. It had a good Regidrago matchup, but like Legacy Energy was way too good. And also like I just didn't love, like I won a challenge with Lugia with that deck, but I literally bricked 3 times, and then my opponent agreed to ID with me when I was at 3-0 for like no reason. And just like I was like, I won this challenge, sure, but as soon as I play against people who are actually good at Pokemon, I'm just going to get rolled. And you just have no agency to like do anything as Lugia, which I didn't particularly like. I played it in the past, but the deck was like completely different. So this list got sent to me. So my friend Isaiah, he sent me like kind of it was the same concept, but it was just a little bit more raw of a list. And I was like, okay, like this seems cool, blah, blah. So I sent it to my friend Nick, who does like all the laddering of like experimental decks. I'm like, just play this on ladder, see how it is. And he played it, and he was like, wait, this deck is like low key good. And I was like, okay. So I took it, and I played a couple games on ladder. I was like, all right, like this is good, but I can make it better. So I spent like the better part of 3 weeks just grinding the deck online, making a lot of changes to it, just kind of improving it. And by the time the week before Baltimore came around, I was able to. I ended up bubbling out of top 4 at a cup because it was. I think it was like 18 people, but it was 5 rounds, so it was super annoying. And the only reason I lost like the 2 games that I did was because I got like obscenely unlucky. Like I was digging into like I had a bunch of dig plus a gear into like 9 cards, and the bottom 2 cards were my last 2 Ionoan deck, so I like lost. And then against the Charizard, I wiped his Bibarel, wiped his Pidgeot, and then I honored him to 2. His draw for turn is Rare Candy, Dust Noir, Boss, and I'm like, all right, cool, and that's what like lost me the game. So I wasn't like, I was a little tilted, but I was like, like the deck is still like super good. And the deck was super good. I was like, you know what, like I'm not this like that press that happens. One thing too is that I knew that I had a really big kind of what the heck is going on factor. The entirety of day one, because basically every single person I sat across from the entire event just had no idea what was going on. Like when I puffined for 3 Duskulls, they were like, what? It was actually really funny. I'm sure I'll go into my run here in a bit, but in terms of the prep, I just played like a lot of, just did a lot of laddering. I do a lot of theory too, just kind of like thinking like, I like to kind of compartmentalize my deck building decisions, because at the end of the day, there's only one metric that determines whether a deck is good or bad, and it's your win percentage. So I kind of wanted to add cards that just added to my win percentage, right? So, for example, something like Iron Bundle was a week of inclusion, because I was arguing with fellow local Matthew Tam, Mr. CPOW himself.
Known scammer, Matthew Tam.
Scammer, yeah. But I was arguing because he was like, we need to put second Countercatcher back in. And I had been playing with second Countercatcher. But one of those things I was like, number one, like, there's so many times where I just want to Gus here because the list didn't play any copies of Boss's Orders for obvious reasons. I didn't want to mill them. And I was like, sometimes I just need like a push effect, because against decks something like Raging Bolt, Regidrago, Miraidon, or even Roaring Moon, they'll play like a single 1-prizer, or they'll put like Greninja down, and they'll shove it up if they miss or something. And since you're only playing Countercatcher and Prime Catcher, if you're even on prizes, your only out is the 1 Prime Catcher in your deck. And that's if you don't if you didn't have to use it earlier on already, right? So I was like, I just need something. And I was like, well, you know what? And I saw a Japanese list, a Palkia Dusknoir list. I was playing Iron Bundle. I'm like, you know what? Like, that just makes a lot of sense. So I put one in, and I was like, okay, this card is broken. And it single-handedly won me like 6 or 7 games throughout the tournament. So that was just a card that I was like, this is the effect that I need. I need a push effect. Not even just because of push. And I play 4 Night Stretcher. I play 3 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball. I play so many outs just to get it in play. So it's like it was the perfect solution for that. So that's kind of just how I like to compartmentalize my stuff, and ended up paying off big time.
Yeah, after playing the deck too, like you're 100% right. The bundle kind of adds a kind of that effect that you're mentioning, and kind of pressure as well, where sometimes you're not fully set up yet, and you kind of need to buy a turn, and if they don't have a switch out or can't retreat and have to use their attached return for that retreat, it's actually really good. Mike, the thing that I thought that was interesting about the deck is where I think a lot of people could go wrong with it. Resource management is probably your biggest enemy, right? And playing Gardevoir as much as you and I did, even playing regular Zard with Pidgeot and Bibarel, all you're doing is resource management. But this was like resource management on steroids, right? Like you're always thinking about, okay, you only play 4 energy. Mm-hmm. Are all 4 energy in deck? Okay, do I have to Rod back now? Can I use Stretcher just to attach return if I Infernal Rain? Things like that, I think what makes it a high-level deck that gives you freedom to play other cool cards. I do agree that Countercatcher, losing that early if you squawk it away, that sucks, right? It feels really bad. You just know right there and then, okay, one of my outs for Gust is gone, because theoretically you're always going to have Countercatcher available in the matchup with the Duskull. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to play it with Zard and seeing like the other decks come up with a similar kind of archetype, where we saw it do very well in Baltimore as well with Palkia. And that deck being something that's also pretty strong because of Greninja, and you being able to get rid of Manaphy with a Dusknoir, go ahead and knock out 2 bench sitters with Greninja. We're obviously just coming into a point in Pokemon that if you can put a lot of damage counters out on the field, it's going to do something really great. I talked about last time on the podcast as well, where it's like, all right, disruption is like a huge, huge thing. This is disrupting at a different level. Putting pressure and damage counters on the field, and then ioning to low card hands when you set up your board, then you kind of just put people on checkmate. So that being all said, when you're getting this list together, is that what your ultimate goal was? I just want to be in the most checkmate positions.
So it's a combination of things, right? Because what Dusknoir allows you to do is it's essentially, so if you think back to the history, so I play a lot of retro, so I've seen a lot of different types of cards become reprinted and a lot of different effects. So the effect of giving your opponent a prize card has always been something that's insanely good. For example, something more recent, if you think about like Lieutenant Surge, if you play Pidgeotto Control, usually you would play a card like the Call Sign Magneton, which what the effect would do, for those who don't know, you'd knock yourself out, and then you'd search your deck for 3 supporter cards. Effectively, what that does is it forces your opponent ahead on prizes, but what it does, it gives you access to insanely powerful card called Lieutenant Surge's Strategy, which let you play 2 additional supporter cards, right? So, sure, you're letting your opponent accelerate the game state because they're taking a prize. However, you're giving yourself access to more powerful cards that accelerate your win condition. So, if you think about Dusknoir as a card, placing 13 damage counters anywhere is insane. That is an insane effect. Sableye was a game-breaking effect. That was 12 cards, and you had to have 10 cards in the Lost Zone, right? That was 12 damage counters, excuse me. So, this card is just like, it was ridiculous. When I saw it got printed, obviously it was like, that was all the hype after NAIC, because people were like, oh, this card is going to dominate the World Championships in Charizard. Granted, it did have the problem with that is that the Duskulls were 60 HP, and obviously the rise of Regidrago created a big problem for it, because in the Twilight Masquerade format, Charizard's only really bad matchup besides Control was was Dragapult, just because of the extra 60 spread. So it was kind of put it in a weird spot where it's like, okay, like I don't want to play Charizard to take a really bad Dragapult matchup. But then again, like Charizard was the best user of this card. Now, granted, I actually saw Henry Brand play his version of the Bennett Dusknoir the day before the World Championships because we were doing all the testing in the hotel and we were just kind of at these tables in the back. It was a lot of fun. But it was interesting to see kind of how his deck worked because when I was looking at that, I was like, dude, like there's no way that works. But you know, he only went 3-3 in the event, but when I kind of saw how the deck functioned, I was like, wait, this is like pretty solid, this kind of engine, like this can work. And intrinsically, if you think about it, Charizard is not like the thing is, what's high maintenance about like Charizard Pidgeot is just getting 2 stage 2s into play. But if you just play a lot more stage 1s of the Dusclops, like the effect that you want is just going behind, you don't really care that you're giving up the prize because you're making your Charizard a lot more powerful. Something that the Dusknoir and the Palkia decks kind of suffer with is that as the game goes on, you know, if you're using up your Dusknoirs, the bench gets smaller, but something like Bennett, you're only doing 30 in item locking, and then you're kind of relying on what's in your opponent's hand. With Palkia, you're relying on your bench sizes, and if you keep popping Dusknoir, you have to keep refreshing the bench size. With Charizard, it's one of, if not the most broken attacker in the whole game. And not only that, is that as the game goes on, my attack just gets better and better and better, right? So if I'm able to combo that, you know, I could turn Dusclops into an effective plus 80 modifier, which knocks out, you know, depending on how late you are in the game, it knocks out practically anything in format. So I basically just kind of was like, okay, if I mash these 2 cards together, you know, 2 of the best cards in the format, something will have to work, right? And it was just kind of about finding that balance. And, you know, it also just so happens that the engine of, you know, Mew, Fez, Stretcher, and Pokestop, something I saw on Twitter, I was like, you know what? Like, what is stopping me from just putting Charizard in here? Like, a broken attacker. I play 4 Rare Candy. I just see, like, a million cards a turn. If I get into that, I'm just going to keep Dusknoiring, and then I just throw a Zard in their face, and they have to deal with it. Because, like, if I throw a Bennett in your face, granted you can't use items, but it's only 250, right? But if I throw a 330 HP Charizard in your face, you have to deal with that now. Otherwise, I'll just sweep you anyway, right? Another unexpected benefit of playing Charizard versus like Palkia is that I can sustain a fully single prize board early, where something like Palkia has to put down a Palkia V to attack. And against decks like Raging Bolt or Miraidon or Roaring Moon, you want to try and offset the prize trade and just go let them take a single prizer, and then you win in 3 attacks before they can win in 3 attacks. Now, granted, with more Dusknoirs, you can get a little tricky and you can actually win the game a turn earlier. I actually did it against somebody or multiple people in Baltimore. But against decks like Palkia, if they like go Raging Bolt, knock out your only Palkia V in play, things can get a little bit hairy. So it was just a lot of, you know, putting 2 intrinsically broken cards in the same deck and just trying to find the balance of kind of what I could handle. And George, like you kind of said before, in terms of resource management, this deck is a lot of sequencing. It's one big sequencing puzzle and kind of figuring out what you want to do. For example, like if I get a Charizard EX knocked out and I have a Charmeleon on the bench, I know that I will have to Super Rod back in energies, and I'll probably Night Stretcher, or I'll Super Rod in the Charizard, or Night Stretcher the Charizard, whatever, right? However, if I want to see a bunch of cards, depending on what else I need, say I need a Prime Catcher this turn, right? Before I Super Rod the stuff back in and pull the Zard out, I'll use Fez, and then I'll use Pokestop to try and get those cards first. Then I'll put the Charizard back in, pull that out, and then I'll play the Iono. But it all depends on what I need, right? Because I have a higher chance of pulling Prime Catcher out of my deck with, say, the 12 cards that are in the deck, and I have maybe 10 in my hand. I have a better chance of pulling Prime out of those than if I were to put Zard into the deck, cards that aren't outs, use it, and then Iono, and then sure, you know, maybe I hit, you know, I draw into 3 cards, but say in order to thin cards out of my deck, I have to shuffle it back, or I have to shuffle my deck. And then I completely negate what I just wanted to do, and then I'm going to end up missing the card I need, right? So just one big kind of sequencing puzzle, and a deck like this puts that kind of to the extreme. So, you know, you need to prize check, and you really need to manage your board state. Like, for example, I can't squawk away 2 Rare Candy. That just is not going to work, right? So it's about finding that kind of balance of, these are the resources that I absolutely need, and this is, you know, what I need to kind of establish a win condition. So it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging,
Kyle,
but very rewarding.
Kyle, I know you have another question too from Mike, but I just want to say as well, because I don't want to blow past this. The combination of Night Stretcher and Pokestop is absolutely broken. Because if you could Pokestop away a Pokemon, if you have Night Stretcher in hand, or if you get it off a Pokestop combined with Rare Candy, the Dusknoir play and the Charizard play just comes that much easier. Even the same thing, if you get rid of a Dusclops, instead of having to go search that out with Ultra Ball, if you have Night Stretcher in hand, you just get that back and you can make the play that you want to make play. So, yeah, I mean, crazy brain moves on that. I enjoyed playing the deck a lot. I wish I would have played it to Baltimore and listened to you, but that's for another day.
Wouldn't be the first time. It's not going to be the last time.
No, I
no,
agree.
It is the last time. It is the last time.
Dude, what if I don't go? What if I don't go?
Oh, here we go. It's happening.
You'll still make me a deck list.
Yeah, probably.
Call him in. Get the red phone. No, I agree. That combination of Pokestop and Night Stretcher, and you're seeing a lot more decks adopt that. You're seeing. I think of the Goldengo list because I'm a cheese brain guy. That deck plays that. Any deck that plays Pokestop, I feel like can really take advantage of that combo. Because it's not, sometimes you just see the Pokemon and the resources in your hand versus having them in your deck with Super Rod. So I think that card is slowly starting to creep up in power level of just like, if you're not running at least 3 or 4 of these, you are throwing if you're playing Pokestop. So it's definitely ahead of the curve here. I'm looking at your list here. Like you said, there's definitely some choices you have to make here. And I love the inclusion of some of the cards you have in here, like obviously like the Pokegear's fun, the optimal Pokegear art IMO. That is the best version of that card to play. I don't own them because I'm poor, and dumb.
Dude, that was in a trainer toolkit.
I didn't get that trainer toolkit. I stink. I got the one with the dark green.
Oh, okay.
That card stinks.
Dude, the green one, I actually used to play... Dude, if you look at the Goodra list I have the stamped one, it's the Scarlet Violet one. I couldn't find that one, and then I don't own the Unbroken Bonds ones. And that was just one I had in a pile of book. I'm like, all right, sure, Pokegear, go in my deck.
I like the Scarlet and Violet ones. I like the lime green. Yeah. I don't like the forest green.
I just like the green in general. I think the card is good. But this one, it did its job, but it hit, I think, more than it missed. So, yeah. That's all that matters.
So let's talk about a little bit about your run here. So what were some of the what were some of the things that you were hoping to run into? What were some of the things that you didn't see as much of? And given the state of how this deck works, obviously you said it's a combo puzzle. Mm-hmm. It's a sequencing puzzle. Are there any stories you can share from the ground floor of like some weird gameplay scenarios you might have ran into? So go ahead and talk about the run as a whole.
So basically, this deck, its only bad matchups are going second against Regidrago. You basically lose on the spot. You might as well just concede. If they don't do so, Regidrago is kind of like a bricky deck in general. But if they do anything and get turn 2 Dragapult or turn 2 Kyurem, you just lose on the spot. And then if you go second against Lugia, if they get turn 2 hands in your face, the only way you deal with that is double Noir, which is pretty tough to get on your second turn unless you just high roll into 3 Candy, which is insane. So that's the only bad matchups. Everything else is pretty reasonable. Your turbo matchups, so Raging Bolt, Miraidon, and Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon is a fall asleep auto win matchup. Charizard is actually a lot closer than I thought it was. If they play Barrel, so if they play the Dusknoir themselves, it's a little more interesting. If I found that if they play Barrel, it also gets a little interesting too. If they were playing a non-Dusknoir. So usually the decks that were playing Dusknoir weren't playing Barrel. So it kind of created an interesting dynamic. I think the matchup is overall pretty fine. Although the guy who I lost in the last round, he just opened going first. He opened Double Puff and Rotom all 3 games, and I was like, all right, bro, cool. That was pretty sick.
Good player. Good player.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, I think the matchups I just didn't want to hit Regidrago. If I didn't hit Drago, and spoiler alert, I hit 0, which was pretty nice. But it was really good. And one thing that also was very convenient. This almost feels like the second time. Not that I've lucked into it, but it just kind of been a nice convenience that since I'm playing so many copies of Dusknoir and also a copy of Canson Clone, the quad Ogerpon decks that were all over the place in day 2 is a complete auto win matchup. It's unlosable. I played against one in round 10, and I ended up Dusknoiring 4 times, and then as soon as I slam Canson Clone to Iona him to 1, he immediately concedes the whole set and just goes, "You got it, bro." So that was one thing that was really nice because obviously the Cologne was for Thorns, where like at NAIC I played Cologne and Charizard also, but instead of I played that for the Cornerstone, for fear of Cornerstone and Raging Bolt, but then I hit 3 Thorns decks in a row, and of course that made it unbelievably free. So that was kind of this was another thing where just kind of how the deck functioned kind of worked out for me. Granted, like I knew about not the quad Cornerstone deck, but like Cornerstone in general, and I was like pretty fine with it. Another thing too is that I actually beat a Pidgeot Control. It was a really good player, and not only like was the fact that my list was so different that he didn't know kind of what was going on, but just the fact that I had so many Dust Noir meant that I kept being able to just kind of like I'd be able to like Noir kill like a Pidgey, and then I'd be able to like Iono knock out like the Luxray V, or I'd just be able to go like Noir plus Clops onto Pidgeot, Gust, Iono, knocked it out, and then he sat there with like a block and nothing. So that was kind of it. So there weren't really that too many bad matchups. A couple of I don't know if you want me to go into like detail of like all of my losses and all my wins, but basically it was
Not
just
about the losses.
you don't have to.
There's significant.
Yeah, just like the
losses.
losses. I lost to New Jersey guy Hunter Smith because in the first game I didn't realize that I had researched away a stretcher on my first turn. So since I'm obviously only playing 4 energy, it gets a little tricky to like move stuff around, especially getting your Radzard stuck. And I had accidentally gotten it stuck because I needed another stretcher to reload energy to retreat. And unfortunately, he didn't like make the back-to-back-to-back misplays he needed to for me to win. So that was kind of a big throw because I made a play that was a little unnecessary by like putting 3 energy on Radzard, and then he like gusted something. Or I put 3 energy on Radzard, but then I couldn't move it, so I had to attack like every other turn, which gave him enough time to win. And that was kind of unfortunate. And then in like the third game, I just like bricked. I lost to a Raging Bolt with 4 Bravery Charm, which was really annoying. In the first game, I actually opened a 2-prizer, which is like really bad in those matchups. It's like okay because you could just go like fully single prize board state with Radzard, but he had a lot of Bravery Charms in the first game, so like it wasn't great. And then in the third game, I ended up prizing 2 rare candies, which usually in Raging Bolt, if you just like chain Charizards, it's fine. But obviously, since I don't have Pidgeot, it's harder for me to do that. So in the last game, he had all 2 prizes in play, and he had a Bravery Charm in the active Raging Bolt. I think he had already seen Bundle by now, but I went, instead of like trying to play into drawing a rare candy because I also missed Iono in the last turn, which was really annoying, but I put like Radzard energy attack with Charizard EX, and I had whiffed Iono, and then he slams the 4th Bravery Charm. So he had 2 in the discard and 1 on the active, and then he slams the 4th Bravery Charm into the Raging Bolt on the bench, and then he goes Prime Up Fez Iono to 2, and I'm like, okay, cool, and I drew into nothing and lost. That was annoying. Then in round 12, I lost to Lugia, a guy who got top 4. I ended up losing the flip, so that's like already like bad for me. And then in the last game, he ends up Pokestopping away both of his Lumineon, which was really funny. So his only out in deck for win was the last Boss's Orders. Granted, he had Gift Energy and Fez in like a 30-card deck, so like there was a chance he hit it because he's 10 cards, so he's probably like a third chance or better. But of course, I honor him to 1, and I do have a live out to Countercatcher though, because if I Countercatcher up Archeops and with no Gift Energy, and I knock that out, then I just win with Iron Bundle next turn, and instead of seeing 10, he only sees 3 off the 1 Fez. But of course, I honor him into Raw last boss in deck, and I was like, alright, cool, bro, like, just you're better than me, I guess. And then the last round, like I explained before, I kind of, I drew pretty poorly in one of the games, and then in the last game, I was actually in a fine spot, except for the fact that I double prized RDX, which was the first time it happened all day. And I ended up Dust Noiring 4 times, and it was the last 2 prizes. So if I had hit Zardiax off any of those things, I would have been probably okay, because I would have been able to knock out, because I would have ended up putting him to 1 prize, and then I'd just knock out his Zardiax, and I already Dust Clopped his Charmeleon, and then I just honor him to 1. And from there, he only had Pidgeot and like nothing else, so he would need to find like Boss plus double Turbo Energy to win. I actually don't think that would have won because I had no more single prize on the bench because it was just all the Duskulls and they were gone. So it was just like I think Radzard plus Zardiax, but it was the last 2 prizes, and I'm like, what can I do? Right? Just unlucky.
Yeah.
So that was
that for sure feels That for sure feels really bad. I mean, you need your attacker to win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty
Yeah.
necessary.
It feels just super bad too
But
because in the last round I would have played against Nucci, who was playing block, which was like a stupid free matchup too. And then I think as long as I
yeah,
didn't hit Ian or Rowan in top 8, I would have won the event, which is like obviously easy for me to say while I'm sitting here at my desk. But like honestly, like Gardevoir, granted Henry has like unlimited aura, but that matchup was like ridiculously free. Roaring Moon, like I said before, a fall asleep free matchup. Lugia would have been like, it depends. If I went first, I think it would have been fine, but going second would have been bad. But, would have been my first major top 8, which I feel like is, right around the corner here. But
It's coming.
feels a little
It's
bad.
coming.
But you know what? That's Pokemon, right? I also didn't hit a single Regidrago, right? I could have hit 3 like
Yeah.
George did in the first 3 rounds, and then there's my tournament, right?
correct.
So
Correct. So speaking of the tournament in a whole, this was the first regional where 7-2 was the absolute worst record you could have to go into day 2. Being that you made day 2, you probably didn't think about it much, but for us at the lower tables, it's pretty scary when you're talking about IDs in round 3, I should say.
gentlemen's game.
What's your thoughts on it? Gentlemen's, yes, that's what I mean. Avoiding draws is what I meant. Yes, going into a gentleman's agreement. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's better for the game? Do you think moving forward you're going to see people understand gentlemen's agreements better, or do you think this is something that's making it a little bit harder for people?
So I kind of have a couple takes on this. So as somebody who I've been in day 2 plenty of times in the last, since over the last couple of months. I do like the fact that day 2 is smaller because it makes the tournament run a lot faster. I also have never ID'd in round 9 to get into day 2. The one time I did go in at 6-1, I had to win to get in. So I do think that it's good that they're making it a threshold to make day 2 smaller, because it kind of, day 2, when there's 300 people in day 2, not that making day 2 means like anything, because you still have to like win to, get good placement, because if you look at your limits page and it's, 287th, were you really there? Right? So I think it's nice that day 2 was smaller, and for me, like someone who would never ID, like I'm playing out regardless, because statistically your round 9 opponent will be easier than anyone you play in day 2. So mathematically it just makes sense for them to change it. However, I don't like the fact that it promotes gentlemen's agreements so early on. Now I do like to play not aggressive decks all the time, but I do play pretty fast. So I don't end up putting myself in a situation to tie very often. I will say my first gentleman's agreement I think was round 6 against Control, just because I knew that I would either win quickly or I would lose in a long game. And just staying out of the tie bracket is super important, just because a lot of the decks, like for example Charizard, granted this version of Charizard was a lot better, but historically, a deck like Stall, which ties a lot because it's very slow, is something that if, even with one tie, if I can stay out of that bracket, I'm statistically more likely to hit decks like Raging Bolt and Miraidon that are faster than something that's slower, something like Gardevoir, which is a good matchup, but Gardevoir or Stall. So I just say like to play faster, and you just finish games quicker, which helps a lot. But I do think that punishing like one tie, especially because if you get an opponent that doesn't agree to a gentleman's, and it's like if I have, like for example in Charlotte last year, I got kind of sharked on a gentleman's in round 9 against Gardevoir, where we kind of went to turns, and I had a switch cart boss. I was playing Mew. I had switch cart boss for win in hand next turn to knock out Zacian. But he was trying to explain to me how that with like 2 Curlias, he was going to draw into his like 5-card combo after I just judged and pathed him. So, with something like that is really no arguing with that person. So that obviously creates a lot of issues. But I am glad that they kind of got it down where it's like, I don't know. I think you could look at it both ways, because for people who, maybe don't play as fast as I do, which, there's a lot of people, it is kind of tough, especially for newer players, to like understand, when it's corrected gentlemen's. Like I always do gentlemen's on board state, but it's something that you don't really want to have to explain to somebody when they're having a really good tournament run. It's like, oh, you're 5-2, like you have to win or lose, and then it gets to time, and it's 2 newer players that don't really understand, and they both just take each other out, right? Now on the flip side of that, in like day 2, I do think, I like that there's less rounds, but I think it's a lot more punishing and a little bit more high rolly, where it's like what matchups you hit. Because, like, for example, in round 12, I was, still in contention for cut. Granted, I did go in an X2, which I could have gone in an X1 or XO, whatever. But it kind of comes down to, I lost my last 2 rounds, and then I went from, a table 11 or whatever I was at to out of, bubbling out of top 64, which is just feels awful. Especially because, like, if you lose, if you're that far into contention that late in the tournament, and then you take 2 losses and take a nosedive, it just feels really bad, especially because people who went into day 2 at, like, 7-1-1, for example, they're effectively the same thing, but the difference is that if they lose their last 2, they still have 1 more match point than I do. So even though, like, technically, like, you don't want to tie, it just creates, like, a really awkward thing where it's like, well, I'd rather tie here, but that would mean I have to win out my last 2 rounds regardless. It's just basically if I want to screw over my opponent or not. So it just creates an interesting dynamic. I do think that the cut, some of, like, the cash, like, the bubble situation is, like, really bad. Like, for example, like JW, you can't lose your winning in the top 8 and then just, like, bubble money. Like, it happened to a bunch of people at Worlds and it happened to him here. It's like, that just feels so bad. Like, I know I would be, like, I was upset, not really upset, but I was, like, mildly annoyed for bubbling top 64. But, doing that and bubbling cash and walking away with nothing after you, like, maybe you barely got high rolled on your win in the top 8, that just, something's wrong with that. I kind of proposed, I was thinking, like, what a better system would be. Like, if they kept the day 2 7-2, but they just went back to the traditional, or the modified Swiss that we have had for a while, where it's 15 rounds still for however many people. I think that would have solved a little bit more of an issue, just because there's more rounds to sort that out. When there's less rounds, there's a lot more variance. It's similar to the thing, like, for example, like the Champions League that just happened. Playing 15 rounds best of 1, sure, is like takes the same amount of time as like 12 rounds best of 3, but your individual variance in all those games is significantly higher, which some people like, some people don't. If you have a round where you just open, like, for example, like in round 1, I opened Iron Bundle Pass going first against Raging Bolt and got obscenely lucky that I didn't, like, he whiffed the knockout. Where if that was like a best of 1, if he knocks me out, what did I do? I just, drew a card, pass, and then I lose that round. So there's pros and cons to it. I mean, in the end, TPCI is going to make whatever decision they make, and you just kind of have to suck it up and deal with it. Common saying is just like, if you just win, it's not going to be a difference. It's not going to make a difference. So, I mean, I don't know. It's like fine, but we'll see.
Kyle, like, from our standpoint, where, we're probably on the other side of what Michael's talking about, wouldn't you love for TPCI just to come out and say, like, hey, listen, there's going to be no draws. This is what it is at the end of a game. If we go off of prizes, you have to play towards that at the end of turns. Like, some set rules that everybody knows going in and not leaving it up to, someone's decision of who would have won the game.
I think that's a slippery slope you run into, because I agree with what Mike said, where, like, I feel like they've made really good strides to kind of, like, cater more towards the competitive side of Pokemon. It's hard to, we see it from a very competitive standpoint because we're competitors, but, like, this is akin to across any sort of competitive medium. There's going to be people that take it a lot more seriously than others do. So, like, I don't think you can completely outcast one half without, completely catering to the other. You have to have that balance there. And I think if you go with the angle of, like, they should go back to how they did it off of prize cards, then that kind of puts the people that play those not prize card, based win conditions, that forces those people to, to not play those decks. Control and, decks that go for those alternate win conditions. You don't want to completely alienate a player base for that. So that just looks bad on their point. I think I agree. I think this is going to be a very fluid problem they have to work out. It definitely, I mean, I didn't see much of it because I was kind of out of it by round 5 anyway. I ran into, like, one situation in my round 5 where we had, like, 10 minutes left to play a game, and we already both had a tie, so we both kind of were just like, listen, let's just play it out. He's playing Raging Bolt, I'm playing Lugia. I'm probably going to lose this anyway if I don't set up. When you start getting, I think it's just easier to base the gentleman off of prize cards because it's cleared right in front of you. I feel like when you start going up a board state, it can get a little hazy. But I think it's tough because I think they need to, some of the decisions they put in place, I think, are good. But But I agree. I also think it's bad if you lose your winning in, you can then bubble out of the money. So that stinks. I think they need to, maybe that aspect of it can be adjusted as the season goes along. But I think in terms of the IDing, that's tough.
One really good change that I will say, like a 100% positive change, is the increase in prizing.
Yes.
Obviously, they didn't change the calf prizing, which they increased last season. But I think giving the booster boxes to basically everyone in day 2, and then just kind of trickling down a lot more of the packs is really good. Because number one, it makes like feeling bad. Like, granted, I finished technically like top 128, but I still got a booster box, which is like really nice. And it's nice to have like the pity box after having a bad day, because granted, like I bubbled out of 18 packs, but getting a booster box in general feels better than getting handed half a box of whatever set. Just like, really. Also, that it trickles into day 1 where people get their prizing. Like, even if you finish in the top 512, you still get 9 packs, right? Which keeps a lot of people kind of coming back. Where if you get a little bit more of an incentive to do that. Because I feel like it can get very daunting where it's like, okay, the first time you get any sort of prizing is in the top 64. And especially with the size of these events nowadays, if you have a 3,000 person regional, getting the top 64 is really tough, right? Just in general. And for like a casual player who just wants to get some booster packs, comes from League where it's like, I go play League, get some packs, like, oh, I want to go to the next step up. Going from a 30-person league, which is a relatively large league, to a 3,000 person regional, where you just get, pub stomped. It's just not a good look for them. So the fact that they're giving prizing that's a little bit further down, where top 512 is very manageable for basically anybody. I think that's a very, very positive thing they've done. So they definitely are making improvements, but with the gentlemen's, it's just a slippery slope, because, one way could be good, but then it creates problems. There's no perfect solution. The only quote-unquote perfect solution would be to do best of 1, and then if the game doesn't finish, you just get a double game loss. But no one wants to do that, right? So it creates those things where it's like, okay, sure, like we can tie, but it all depends. It just depends on what you want to get out of the event, how far you are in there. Like if you're 7-0 and you take a tie at 7-0, sure, it doesn't feel good, but you take it and you go 7-0-1 versus if you're like 4-2 and you're like, okay, like we don't need to tie here. Like this is a little ridiculous.
Right.
So yeah,
I want to give.
I had the situation where I was. Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say I was 2-2, and me and my opponent, turn, game 3 starts, and I said, "So what do you want to do here?" And he's like, "Oh, we'll play it out." And I'm like, "Well, we're not going to come to a conclusion more than likely. So what do you want to do if it's a tie?" And he says to me, "I'm fine with tying." I'm like, "Well, if we tie, neither of us can make day 2." He goes, "Well, I don't plan on making day 2."
Yeah.
I said, "Cool." So I guess me either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough, man. You really can't do anything. Like I said, there's so many people. There's a lot of people going to these things. Only a very small percentage of these people are going to sweat the world's invite. Some people are just here for the weekend to play cards.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So that's tough.
I mean, there's also things like you can say, especially like, so I only make gentlemen's going into game 3. It depends on what I'm playing against, right? Like I knew when I played against the Bon Ahmed playing Pidgeot Control, I knew that he was playing Control, and I knew that we wanted to finish. So in a situation like that, I was fine being like, hey, you want to make sure like this game ends like with a winner? It was like fine. But for all the other times, I said it either before the game or before game 3. I'm like, hey, do you want to make sure like we just have a winner in the set? And my opponents all were like, yeah, definitely. Granted, I was on like an X-1 record basically the whole day doing that, but it's definitely something that's very, it doesn't have to be a big complicated process. Board state is something that's a little more convoluted, but it also depends on your opponent. I have a rule where it's like the first 3 rounds, I force myself to win game 1, just because on average in your first couple rounds you're going to be playing against either newer players or slower players. Like a great example, really quick, is in Hartford a couple years ago. I was playing Lugia, and I played against a guy playing. It was like Rapid Strike Box, like there was no Intellion, but it was like Zero Aura VMAX and Rapid Strike Urshifu. And he like got off this insane like Zero Aura VMAX play where he knocked out my only Lugia V in play and a Tyranitar in play. And I was like, I looked at the clock and there's only 25 minutes, and I was like, there's a 0% chance that we finish 3 games here, and I refused to take a round 1 tie. So I somehow stuck it out and ended up winning somehow, which was insane. And then, as I'm not going to tell him to play faster when I'm up a game, right? Like I'm not obliged to do that. And then, oh no, we run out of time and he has 3 prizes left and I have no 3 prizes in play, right? Or whatever it was. So that's just one thing where you can strategically, like, you don't have to tell granted, you can tell your opponents to play faster, but in the first couple rounds, your opponent might feel a lot more pressure, and it's just not going to work out the result you get. Like, if you're in round 8 and you're getting slow played by someone who knows exactly what they're doing, totally different. But if you're playing against a new player who's just naturally playing slow, there's not really much you can do to do that. You can ask them to play faster, but they're not going to play faster. So that's one of those things where strategically it's like you force yourself. Like, I force myself, you have to win game 1. Because if they're playing slow, you just let them play slow. And if they're not that good, you'll just beat them anyway in 2 games. But it's the worst thing when you're down a game with 20 minutes left. And you're like, if we've actually played 3 games, I would win. But the matter of fact is that I'm going to win game 2 in 18 minutes, and then there's just no way we're finishing a game in 2 minutes. So it's about understanding your situation and kind of assessing where you're going to get your maximum win percentage from. And even still, the same kind of thing applies when if you are playing against a guy who's super slow and you just have an awful start in like a really good matchup for you, it's in your interest to scoop 2 minutes in so you can play a full 2 games and actually set up and win. It's all about maximizing your overall win percentage for the set, not just the game.
Yep. That's all pointed stuff. Just get better, folks. Play faster.
Play faster.
And,
that's simple.
Also, I want to give a special shout out to Thomas Diemter, the only person to make day 2 that did not finish in the top 128. He finished 129th. So the only person to not make it home with the booster box that weekend.
Man.
That is
tragic.
That's some tough stuff, but I think I've gotten everything out of the way in terms of Baltimore. George, you want to? I think we want to move on to the next segment, which is my favorite part of the show. Mike is going to be our guinea pig this week in Squawk or Seize, where we're going to ask Mike a series of this or that questions, and then he gets to decide. If he's going to squawk it, which means he likes it, he's going to keep it, he's going to hold it close at night, or if he's going to seize it and discard and draw fresh 6. Now, George, well, we're gonna alternate questions back and forth here. And Mike, I thought this would be fun because, we're kicked off in the 2025 season. They showed our regional schedule, but there's actually 3 missing slots on the NA side of the circuit here. So there's still 3 mystery spots as to where these next 3 regionals are. You're someone that travels, a pretty frequent bit. So we're going to get your opinion on some regional locations. So we're going to see where Mike likes to travel and where Mike hates to go. George, you want to kick us off?
Sure, I could start it off. Let's do something internationally in Canada. I know we have Vancouver and we have Toronto, but would you like to see a Montreal regional?
Okay, I will say I will squawk Montreal.
Yeah.
Because I hate French people. They're actually the worst, right? Not all French people, but just in general, right? I played against French kids playing hockey when we're growing up. They suck. But if I go to Montreal, that means not only I get to fly home, right? I get to fly home and drive there. So I get to see everybody in New Jersey, and I get to drive there. So that's a squawk for me. That's good for me. I can deal with that. It's only like a 6-hour or a 4-hour drive from where I live, so it's okay.
That's not that bad. I love that. That's out of context. That's going to be so funny.
Someone clip that.
All right, yeah. Shout out to hockey season.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give you a bit of a softball here, Mike, because I think everybody is dying to know your thoughts of everybody's favorite city in
Peoria.
the Midwest. Are we squawking or seizing Peoria, Illinois as a regional location?
Seize, that might be the worst city I've ever been in my entire life. There is not a single reason why I would ever go back to Peoria, Illinois, other than to farm money off of Midwestern players. That city, so everything, for those of you who haven't been there, who haven't had the displeasure to go there, not only does everything close at 7 o'clock, but there's nothing even to do there, and it's cold, right? I lived in the Midwest for 6 years where I went to school in Indiana, right? And it's cold during the winter. But this place was insanely frigid. And not only that, most convention centers, when you go in there, they have it cold in the beginning because I know when people come in, it's going to heat up. This place had the heat cranked to 11 when no one was in there. So not only were you freezing outside, but when you walked in, you were dying of heat. I remember there was like a pile right by sides. There was a pile of jackets that were just there because people refused to carry them around. Now, I had the wherewithal to just suck it up and just walk over there in shorts, and it was miserable, but it was like fine. And it was such a miserable experience. Not only that, I also prized all 4 Gardevoirs against the guy who won the event in the first round. So that, just tops that one off. So I'm going to seize the hell out of Peoria, Illinois. Good riddance.
Love that.
So you're a big fan of Peoria. That's a got it.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Yeah.
I got one that we had a lot of fun at last year, and I think it would be great to go back. Orlando, Florida.
I'm going to squawk Orlando. Orlando is is such a great, I think the convention center is so great. It's really big. It's also one of those cities where it's very accessible for a lot of people, and it's nice and toasty. It's warm. If you want to go to Disney, I remember the first time I went to Orlando Regionals. I went to Disneyland the day before. It was super awesome, like the Star Wars thing. I'm not like the biggest fan of like Disneyland in general, but I had never been to the Star Wars like exhibit thing, like the Star Wars land. So that was really cool. The convention center is massive. They have. I'm a big proponent of when I get to the convention center, I just want like some fruit, like an apple or a banana or something just before, just to get me going, and some coffee. And Orlando has a lot of really great options. I guess it used to be Overload events, which they always ran great events. I guess like they're not doing it anymore, so that doesn't really add to it. But I'll definitely squawk Orlando. I'll definitely be going back this year, whether it's Orlando or Atlanta. Not really sure, but I would definitely go back. So squawk.
All right, into that. All right, we're gonna give the West Coast some love here. Oddly omitted from the schedule this season, but seemed to be a big hit last year. Unless you played VG, in which you didn't start any of your rounds on time. Are you squawking or seizing Los Angeles as a potential regional location this season?
I think I'll probably squawk it. I didn't go last season, but I heard like relatively positive things. I also have a couple friends that live in LA, so I wouldn't hate going there just to see. Obviously we have Worlds in California the next 2 years, this year in Anaheim, which is like moderately close to LA. So I would say like a tentative squawk. I obviously don't have first-hand experience like the other ones, so I wouldn't know. But I would say relatively squawk. I don't mind. LA is like fine. I get to go to my favorite like chicken sandwich place. Get to see some of my West Coast friends. I'm sure the Pokemon there is fine. A lot of the LA, I mean, I hear a lot about California. Like back in the day, California States was super hard. But to be honest, when I was in like Portland, like the West Coast players are nowhere near as good as the East Coast players. So I'll squawk it. I'll take the free points.
You can go see an Angels game while you're out there, or a Dodgers game.
I'll say Kings game. Kings game.
There we go. Go. All right, love to see it.
All right. What about one that we haven't been to? Just a big city in general. Being that we always get shafted here on the East Coast. Well, I guess I did have one a while ago, but Secaucus, New Jersey.
Squawk. I would love to sleep in my own bed and then drive 30 minutes to Secaucus and play in a regional. That would be awesome. Squawk. Squawk. I wish that they would do this the Javits Center at some point, but that would never happen. But Secaucus, listen, Secaucus is Secaucus, right? Anyone from New Jersey, it's like, it's not a great, like, you don't go to Secaucus for like, because, like, what do you want to do this weekend? Let's go to Secaucus. Like, no one says that. But for a Pokemon event, one that's so close, it's like easily way too nice. I don't even live in New Jersey, and I would go. Right?
Yeah, but not even that. Like you're one train away, like 15 minutes to being into New York City. So like, if you want to go into the city for the weekend, if you don't make day 2, it's not like it's like a hassle to get there. You get on the train that's right by all the hotels anyway, and you're in the city in 15, 20 minutes.
I mean, forget the city, right?
I don't know. Like,
if I don't make day 2, I'm going home.
Even Hoboken.
I'm going home, though. If I don't make day 2, I'm just going back to my house. I'm having sauce. It's that simple.
I'm saying for people that are traveling to the event.
Okay.
Like, there's still like a lot to like even if it's like you don't want to go outside of New Jersey, like you go to Jersey City, Hoboken, like it's right there.
Go to Hoboken, exactly. There's a lot of great spots in Hoboken to go for sure.
There's so much things to do,
and especially literally you're at the Secaucus Junction, so you could go to not forget that you want to go down to AC, go to AC, right? I'll squawk to AC, Atlantic City, squawk definitely. Go gamble. Are you kidding me? But yeah, definitely. You're in the Secaucus Junction is right there. Definitely. I mean, it's not like the most glamorous spot, right? But it's definitely one that's super solid. And I wish they'd bring it back.
Yeah.
Well, you're also in the Meadowlands too. You get to see MetLife.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm kind of mad I started playing like right after Secaucus Regionals were a thing last year because it would have been literally 50 minutes from my house, and I would have loved that.
I couldn't go. I was at school. I couldn't go.
Rest in peace. L getting an education, brother. Sucks for you. All right, moving on. This is one that I'm surprised is not on the schedule right now, and hopefully, that's something that gets added. It's one that we had fun going to last year. Me and George had a time in the city last year. Are we squawking or seizing Charlotte, North Carolina?
Squawk. It's super close for me now. It's like super close. Go back to the Thirsty Beaver. I didn't get to go last year. So I have to go again. I have to go.
It was sick. It
was
so
Beaver.
sick.
Yeah, the venue was like fine. The service kind of sucked. But honestly, it was very fine. The area around it too had like a Whole Foods. There was the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. I made top 8 at the Cup, which is like whatever. Which is ironically the easiest league cup I've ever been to. It was a 200-person like freebie. But yeah, definitely a really good location. The event ran fine, which I guess you can't really compare like the events how they ran because it's not the same organizer anymore. But I would say the location was pretty accessible. The fact that it was like on the East Coast is nice, and the fact that the thing is the East Coast ones, I get to see everybody there, right? So that's a plus. So I'll definitely squawk Charlotte.
My biggest complaint in regards to Charlotte is that it was way too cold last year. Like,
dude, I wore a
understand it was
sweatshirt and
January.
sweatpants, bro. That's all you need.
I get it. I get it. And like, this is back when I was fat still, so I was like super cold. I was feeling it. Like, but no, it was a fun city. The Thirsty Beaver rocks. Great novelty T-shirt. George and I had a good time.
We'll have to go.
George had a very interesting conversation with a man going to a Melissa Etheridge concert.
Oh, good Lord.
I think, or something.
That's a story for another day.
Yeah.
That's a different podcast for sure. All right, George, you're up.
All right, so I guess this is the last round here.
Give him one more. Give him one more.
You know, they did Knoxville a lot of the times, but I never understood why they chose Knoxville if they were doing Tennessee. So I guess a wish list win for me would be Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah. I will squawk Nashville. I've never been there before, but I've heard a lot of pretty good things. I have a friend of mine who lived there over the summer, and she said that like the street, like not Bourbon Street, that's New Orleans. Different story. Broadway was like the whole thing is pretty sick, and I've heard that for Worlds when they had it there in 2018, that it was pretty cool for people going out like who are of age, just going out and just getting plastered. Like after day 2 or day 1 or whatever happened. I heard a lot of really fun things. So I would definitely, not be opposed to go back to Nashville. I mean, we're going to Louisville, which is like kind of close, I think, in a couple weeks here. So it's like it's like relatively accessible. Anything in the Midwest is usually fine because even if the flights aren't like that great, it's like it's an understandable drive. Like no one wants to drive 8 hours to Tennessee or Kentucky or wherever. But it's like if you can do it if you have to, right?
Yeah,
so
it's feasible.
Yeah, I would definitely not be opposed to a Nashville regional or like another Nashville international. I know we're going back to New Orleans this year, which I'm very excited for. Hopefully I get in. Maybe I'll chase the stipend for that quarter instead. But yeah.
Maybe you'll run into a bachelorette party while you're down there too, because there's a lot of those.
That's my bread and butter. That's my bread and butter.
New Orleans, I'm very much looking forward to. That was a whole lot of fun last year. So
I'm very much okay if we don't go back to Bourbon Street for the rest of our lives, by the way.
Well, okay.
I'm totally
okay. I don't know who listens to this podcast, but the only reason it was that bad is because it was during the Pride week, and it was just chaos. There was way too many people on that thing that were all congregating. Like, there was just like way too many things going on, so there was just so many people. That was the problem. Like, in general, it's probably fine. Like, if you go on, like, a regular week, like, if you were to go, like, this weekend, I'm sure it's very fine. But we went, like, the first week of, like, summer. It was, like, there was way too much going on. Way too much.
Well, it's the same problem you had in Baltimore. There was an Orioles game,
and
a
a
Ravens home opener,
a
Bruce Springsteen concert, and a 21 Pilots concert, all happening within 4 blocks of each other.
Yeah.
Parking was $65. Hell no.
Yeah,
not in my life. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I'll also voluntarily add Brazil on here to seize. That place is a dump. I wish I did better in a different quarter. I would have gladly taken the stipend to London or New Orleans, but it is what it is.
Hey, man.
I refuse to pay $1,000 to go to stay there, but it's okay.
Good night, sweet prince.
I mean, listen, it would have been free. 900-person IC with 3/4 of the people who have no idea what they're doing.
And the freshest acai bowl you'll ever have in your entire life.
Probably.
But that's going to be it for this segment of Squawk or Seize. So good stuff to Mike. We've been going for about an hour, so I do want to touch on this very quickly before we wrap things up. Obviously, the Champions League happened. Raging Bolt won. Congratulations to that guy. over Lugia, my goat. We did get some new cards revealed. So I want to quickly get everybody's thoughts here on which of these like seconds. It's the second half of Japan's like 2-set thing. It's going to be our Surging Spark set. So these are going to be cards we're going to see in November. So I think I'll start with George in this one. Are any of these cards that I don't know if you got to look at any of them yet. Do any of these like kind of stand out to you as like something that you're like remotely interested in?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now in this format with Stellar Crown, everybody's looking at Miraidon and trying to utilize Raikou. And even in the Champions League, you saw like a bizarre Entei deck played with, Teal'c Ogerpon that, with these kind of bench added additional damage for each bench, that you have. It's obviously very good with Area Zero, which you actually saw with everything. So that being all said, Miraidon to play it with Raikou, you have to utilize the Mewtwo, which doesn't really make sense in the deck other than just a bench sitter to get the effect of Area Zero. But this new Pikachu EX that they're coming out with here that can dish out 300 damage, if you could pull that off, is pretty remarkable. And then also, if you are a VG player and you know what Focus Sash does, it's effectively what his Tenacious Heart ability does. So if you do feel like you want, okay, I see an easy 200 HP Pokemon there, let me guss it up to knock it out. Well, joke's on you, pal. You're not knocking it out. You better have a Duskull to put damage on that. And then you're kind of messing up your prize trade anyway.
Yeah. You can also Hawlucha it, but I think it's just the fact that it's a guaranteed live if you like Gust Punch into it, which is just like insanely good. For me, I think the card that is really a really big standout is the Miraculous Intercom, the one that's basically a Lusamine, but an item card. Because if you loop that with something like Regieleki, I think that's just like insanely broken with cards in format like Eerie and Misfortune Sisters and 0-6 Machinations. I think it definitely would create some pretty crazy combos in Pidgeot control specifically. Granted, it is an A-spec, so it'll be competing with Survival Brace and Heroescape, which are both like obviously very good cards. But I think that card is definitely one to look out for. Also, it'll be an R Surging Sparks, but they played it this weekend. That new the cart. I know Haru Nishikawa and Kido Arai, they played it in their Charizard list to both. I think they finished top 16, top 32, or top 32, top 64, something like that. Where it just reads that if you play it down, you just go fill your bench with as many basics as possible. So for decks like Charizard, where you just go get like Duskull, Charmander, Rotom, Pidgey, or something like Regis, where if you have like a Terra Pokemon down and Area Zero in play, you just go grab all your Regis, which is like insane. So I think that card, those are two cards that have a lot of potential. The Pikachu is really good too. Also, I really hope that Hydreigon card, or Hydreigon, is like good, because I think he's a cool guy. He's a cool Pokemon.
Yeah, that's the card. Yeah. You took my answer. I think this Hydreigon card, like, it just reads like a really good card. That first attack, Crash Heads, which is a funny attack name. It's, for its efficient attack, 200 damage, milling 3 cards off your opponent's deck is really good. That second attack is low-key not that bad either. There's still stuff in the format. When this card will come out, you'll still have stuff like Dark Patch. You'll still, you can play this with like a Xatu engine to accelerate the Psychic Energy to it. And then you can play like you're seeing a lot of these like Stellar decks like playing like the Neo Upper Energy just to fulfill these like awkward attacking costs.
Crystal.
So like or Crystal. You can also play that as well. So it's like, it's not an unfeasible, it's not an unfeasible attack to pay off. And 130 to 3 different things. We've seen how effective Kyurem is in Regidrago, so that's definitely a strategy here. And Darkness is just a good type of Pokemon to beat. There's tons of stuff that's weak to Dark. 330 is a good number to hit. You have stuff like Pecharunt and Janine's Secret Art that you can play with this, so to help mitigate the energy costs. Dark Patch, like I said.
Dark Patch, Mochi. Too, with the Pecharunt. And Mochi. Yeah, and then there's that single prize Hydreigon that like lets you look at energy off the top of your deck. So I think this card reads really well. Whether or not how good it'll be in practice is another thing, but I think this card's in my opinion, this is the one I'm looking forward to getting my hands on. And Hydreigon's just cool. He's a cool Pokemon. I initially
thought it was a dragon type and nearly had a stroke.
No, that would have been bad.
No, that'd been awful because I think
That'd
that
been really
new
bad.
Alolan Executor, the second attack reads, it's Dragon type, but the second attack is like flip a coin if heads knock out active, if tails knock out something on the
Yeah.
bench. Like that's just, it's literally an insta kill anywhere, right? Or like either one, but like if you need just a knockout, it just, you have it guaranteed, right? I think that's like a really cool card too for Regidrago, which I think doesn't get particularly bad in the next coming sets. I mean, sure, Briar knocks it down a little bit, but the deck is still just has so many options. Like being able to switch between dragon attackers is just still super, super strong.
Yeah.
What
It's all
about
really
this
good stuff.
new tool card, the Colbur Berry?
Colbur
That
Berry?
actually
you
might
could-
be the best of these berry cards. Low key.
I mean-
I actually don't think it's that bad.
I guess with all the different berries, right? They're very situational. If you remember back a couple years ago, cleansing gloves and a little
Yes.
later on, justified gloves. Those are some things that targeted specific decks in the meta. Obviously, cleansing gloves was targeting Gardevoir, and then in turn was also Mew, and then justified gloves was obviously hitting Charizard, and in turn Roaring Moon. I will say I think that these berries aren't as good as the gloves were because if you can ever put the tool on for something that's proactive rather than reactive, I think it's better. For example, like if you put the Colbur Berry on, like you get Lost Vacuumed off. It's something like Vengeful Punch we saw in the past, Survival Brace, Bravery Charm, stuff like that. It can also get negated by Jamming Tower, where something like the Cleansing Gloves or the Justified Gloves or whatever, stuff like Defiance Band, or et cetera, things that go proactively where you can kind of take the initiative and maybe surprise your opponent. I remember there was one time I was playing against a Mew player, and he ended up going double tablet. He was down a tablet, and I was like, okay, he can't knock out my Gardevoir EX, so I punched into it, and then he went triple tablet plus Cleansing Gloves to knock me out. And that was like something very surprising where, for example, something like the Box of Disaster, I can proactively go and dig for Lost Vacuum, so then when I Brainwave it, I have no problem dealing with it, right? So I think the proactive cards are a little bit better. I guess Box of Disaster was different because it targeted a specific deck that was a quarter of the room. So I think there's a time and place for that stuff, but I think that was also a card that would knock out your opponent's active, where this is something that reduces more damage, where I think a card, maybe something like Bravery Charm that just gives you a little bit more HP, can be something a little more beneficial.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I got one more too.
Go
One
for it.
more too for you, Mike. Interested in your thoughts on this one. Being that we're both Charizard players, Gravity Mountain, the maximum HP of all your Stage 2 Pokemon is reduced by 30. So being on 2 prizes, you can knock out a Charizard EX with another Charizard.
I do think the card is interesting. Obviously, it depends on if you're playing traditional Charizard. Just Defiance Band is probably just a better card because a deck like Charizard, you'd rather play different stadiums. Like in Charizard, you'd rather play Collapse, Temple, or Jamming Tower, or even Lost City over a card like that. It just depends, especially if you're playing Duskull. Obviously, a deck like mine that plays Pokestop is playing Pokestop, not that thing. I think it's something that decks will play to try and counter Charizard, because hitting 300 is a much nicer number than something like 330 or effectively 350. So I think that's a card that is something to look out for. I don't think it'll be played in Charizard for the mirror, but I think it's something that could be targeting some of these higher HP Stage 2 decks, just to try and deal with some stuff like that. Alternatively, I think the other stadium that gives a buff to basics might actually be a little bit better, because if you put that with a Bravery Charm, now you have a 320 HP Raging Bolt. Now, I'm not saying that it's good in Raging Bolt, but something like that where if you kind of want to have it as a tech stadium, that's a really, really tough thing to deal with when you just have a big, bulky basic that you just put in someone's face and you're like, deal with this or you lose.
Yeah, it's all good stuff.
Sure.
I think there's some really interesting stuff coming in Surging Sparks, and truthfully, I think it's going to mix things up a lot more than I anticipated, and that's going to be here a lot sooner than everyone thinks. It's we're nearing the end of September already, which is insane to think about. But as we near the end of September, we've also neared the end of our episode. So, Mike, I want to thank you again for jumping on and giving us your insight. Again, you were one of the smartest people that me and George have the pleasure of knowing. So, your insight is always greatly appreciated in a lot of these situations, and we loved having you on. So
I do play a little bit too much Pokemon.
Yeah, you do. You do be playing a lot, but let the people know where they can find you and all your cool and opinionated deck lists and stuff.
So you can just find me on Twitter at Christmas, like the holiday, TCG. Usually I just post my tournament results, and there's a little bit of yapping that goes on, but primarily it's just tournament results.
Also, don't leave the room immediately, by the way, when we're signing off, because we need to save the recording. So
I got you.
Immediately leave.
But yeah, you're good. So you can just find me there. That's like the only social I have. I mean, I'm on Discord, but like I just lurk in a lot of servers. But yeah, you send me a DM there if you have questions. I've already gotten a lot of questions about my list. And I only finished 66th. Imagine if I made top 8. So yeah, if you have any questions about the list or anything like that, feel free to DM me. But you can find me on there and see some of my hopefully improving tournament results.
All right, and George, let the people know where they can find you.
I am the Pony Bottle Champ on Twitter or the X, wherever you call it. Also on PCGL. Still looking for friend requests. No one wants to play with me, man. I just want friend requests from one of these episodes.
I'll play with you, George.
I appreciate that. Well, me and you usually
Beautiful.
get a little nitty gritty on the Limitless for the next set too. So, but that's where you can find me. And Kyle, where can they find you?
Yeah, you guys can find me on socials at Koopa NJ across platforms. If you guys want to hear me talk more about Pokemon, I am a featured commentator on the Late Night series every Wednesday for the North American leg of the tournament. So if you guys want to hear me yap about all of the latest happenings in Limitless Land, check me out there. I also have a pop culture podcast, the Cooped Up podcast, that goes up every week or so, whenever I got time. I got a new episode coming out sometime this week. And the Squawk vlog is coming. We're working on it. We're going to try to get that out by the end of this weekend. Yeah, the Squawk TV is coming. I just got to go through the footage and make sure that we don't do anything like that, post anything that'll get us arrested. So,
and real quick, talk to Juan, and we will be up on Spotify this week.
Let's go.
This episode.
Hey, let's go.
Hopefully you'll be listening to us on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever else you find your podcasts.
Yeah, I'll touch base with my goat Juan on that later. Shout out to him helping us out. So, but yeah, that's going to be it for this week, folks. Thank you guys for joining us for a fun one, and we'll catch you guys next week for more Squawk and Seas. Have yourselves a wonderful evening, and stay safe.
Peace.